Hi, I'm Representative Josh Cutler. Welcome to another edition of Cutler Corner, keeping you up to date on everything going on Beacon Hill and around the 6th Plymouth District. In today's program, we got a great panel focused on issues of housing authorities here in the South Shore. And we have three terrific guests, housing authority directors from three of the towns in my district. I want to introduce first at the far end of the table, Michelle Gill, who is the Housing Authority Director in the town of Duxbury. And in the center here, Sharon Sylvester, who is the Housing Authority Director in the town of Pembroke. And next to me is Karen Riley, who's the Housing Authority Director in the town of Hanson. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for coming to our show this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Why don't, I'd love to talk. I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the governor's plan, and maybe and let the folks know what that's all about. But before we get into that, I wonder if each of you could kind of tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are, what your daily life is like as a housing authority director, and also just kind of share for folks who may not be familiar. What is a housing authority to begin with? What do you do, and what services do you provide? Michelle, why don't we start with you, and then we can work our way back towards me.
Okay. I am the executive director at the Duxbury Housing Authority. It is considered a small housing authority. We have an elderly complex comprised of 52 units, 8 of which are handicap accessible. We also have what's called 7 scattered sites, which are considered family housing. So with regard to public housing, state-funded, low income, so you have to be of a certain income to be eligible for this particular type of housing.
And how long have you been working in the housing world?
Well, probably about 5 or 6 years. I started at Hull Housing, and then just in August I moved to the Duxbury Housing Authority.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us on the panel. And Sharon, how about yourself?
I started actually in the Norwell Housing Authority about 13 years ago, and I became executive director there 6 years ago. I left there 2.5 years. I was there, executive director for 6 years there, and I left there 2.5 years ago to become the director of the Pembroke Housing Authority. The Pembroke Housing Authority is still considered a small housing authority, though we're larger than either of the other two housing authorities. We monitor about 278 units over 6 different programs. So it's a bit of a challenge because of all the different programs have different qualifications and specifications for, but it's exciting. It's an interesting field to be in. I came from the private sector, but I actually love what I do.
Good. And let me ask you, the housing authorities, I think people have a conception that it's all senior citizens, but that's not necessarily the case. Can you?
No, it's not the case. We have some of the programs are designed specifically for senior citizens. Some years ago, though, they opened up some of those complexes for disabled individuals who are, it depends on whether it's a federal or a state program. For a federal to be a senior, you have to be age 62, to be elderly, and the state program at 60. But so there are a combination of those. There's also family housing for people who are low income, and then there are also voucher programs where you can go out into the private market and the government will pay a piece of that rent, and you pay a piece of your rent as well. So lots of different people qualify for it from all walks of life.
And Karen, you were the Housing Authority Director in Hanson. Tell us about what programs you have in Hanson.
Okay, I have a 68-unit senior handicapped complex that's located at 80 Meeting House Lane. And they're 2-story complexes. There's 4 units in each building, a total of 17 buildings with a community center. I also have a Department of Mental Health complex. It's 8 units. It's run by the Ven Corporation.
Okay.
And that's located on Woodbine Avenue in Hanson. And then we have a family federal housing complex, which is located at 533 Main Street. And that's 6 units of family housing. We have 25 Section 8 vouchers. At the moment, our Section 8 wait list is closed. We do have an open wait list for the senior handicap housing. Federal family housing, the only wait list we have open at the time is a 4-bedroom unit wait list. And the Department of Mental Health, you deal directly through the Venvan Corporation.
Sure. Now, just so folks understand, it's a housing authority. When you say the word authority, it's sort of a quasi-government agency. It's not directly under the auspices of the town. Right. There's actually some state involvement as well. Do you guys kind of share who governs the housing authority? How are those people chosen and so forth? How does that work?
The board is elected through the town of Hanson.
Yes.
And it's elected a vote through the citizens of the town of Hanson. I have a 5-panel board. And I'm elected through the board.
And the governor has an appointment on the board as well, correct?
Right. We have a state representative on the board, resident commissioner also.
And your funding, Sharon, does that come primarily through the state or through the town or through federal vouchers?
The only funding we would get through the town is through CPA funds normally, or any donations of land, which sometimes happens with housing authority. Many of these developments are built on town donated land. It depends on the program. We administer both state and federal programs, so we get funding from HUD, and we also get some funding for our large capital projects through the Department of Housing and Community Development.
And so you're providing these services to folks, largely without any local taxpayer.
That's correct.
Funds, which is that's terrific. So now, Michelle, maybe I can ask you, what if someone who lives in one of our towns in Duxbury, Pembroke, or Hanson, or any of the towns in our PAC TV audience wanted to apply? What is the process whereby they would do so? And is there a preference if they wanted to stay in their own community? Is there a preference that they can express to do that?
Yes, with regard to applying to the local housing authorities, you're able to apply to any of the authorities within the state of Massachusetts. However, the community that you reside in, if you apply to that community, you get what's called resident status, where you'd sit at the top tier of the waiting list for housing.
Is that works? That's the same in all?
Yes.
Great. And so when you apply, if you're trying to get into a particular housing authority, do you have to apply individually, or can you go to one central place and get on a waiting list for a number of them, or how does that work? Who wants to take that one?
You would have to apply to each town.
You would, okay.
There is a generic DHCD form that you can fill out, but you would have to actually go to each town. In the town of Hanson, we have a preference of veterans preference. If you live in the town, and also if you're employed in the town of Hanson, you get that preference also.
Now, I want to ask each of you, what the job entails on a day-to-day basis. I mean, is being a housing authority director more about complying with paperwork and administration and personnel issues, or are you actually like out there with the plumber trying to fix things in the apartments, or is it somewhere in between? Who can tell me a little bit more about the day-to-day life of what being a housing authority director is? Sharon, do you want to?
Well, I think it varies a little bit depending on the size of the housing authority. I was certainly way more involved in a size authority like the Norwell Housing Authority, where there was only 96 units. So if we had one maintenance man, if he wasn't there, then I was with the plumber. That's kind of fun because you have a lot of interaction with the tenants, and this business is really ultimately about people in the end. So I liked that. It's more difficult for me to do it in Pembroke. So my job in Pembroke, I do try and get out to see the tenants, but our developments, we have 3 different developments for our elderly developments. Then we have a number of scattered site homes. So I don't get with each tenant as much as I did in Norwell. And
what size staff do you get to run the housing authorities?
In Pembroke, we have 3 full-time maintenance men.
Just 3?
Just 3, which is really is tight, but they do an awesome job of keeping things running, and they're terrific with the tenants again as well. And we have 3 full-time office staff and 1 part-time office staff. So between us, the small housing authorities kind of run, I know I've told you that, lean and mean. They're a great use of taxpayer dollars, just generally.
So are you handy? Like, could you come and fix my things in my house?
Toilet? Yep, I could plunge your toilet. Yep,
Michelle, what about you? How are things over in Duxbury?
We have a maintenance man and a half.
Okay.
So, and it's it's tough for the 52 units and then 7 scattered sites with regard to plumbing issues, carpentry, flipping a unit. But but he's so dedicated, and he does a fabulous job. I'm grateful for the man and a half in Duxbury, opposed to when we were in Hull. It was even a smaller, considered a smaller housing authority. So it was myself and my maintenance man. And he also was very dedicated and fabulous, and did the job that had to be done. But it's hard work, but it is social work almost, with there being that connection to your tenants.
Sure.
And wanting to provide for them.
I would imagine, because you're not just running a business, you're providing, you are social workers in a sense, right? Do you see that, Karen, when you're helping people, your tenants who come to you with issues? And
our office is located right in the community center, so we have a very relaxed atmosphere that they come in, and a lot of times they walk in to visit and talk, and you worry about them if you don't hear from them. And when we have storms and so forth, you want to make sure that you're checking in with them to make sure they're okay.
No, I remember stopping in during the recent storm when you guys were cooking up pancakes. And making,
it was a party.
It was a party. It was nice. I mean, people lost power, but you guys were making the best of it.
Yeah, we did. We had a good time.
Excellent. Well, I want to turn our attention a little bit to there's been you guys have been in the news lately. There's a major push by the governor to make some fairly significant changes to our structure of housing authorities. Maybe one of you guys, Sharon, do you want to kind of maybe share with our viewers what some of the plans that you are seeing out there from the governor would do?
Well, I have some sympathy for the governor, because he was faced with, housing authorities have been in the news.
Just to back up, there were some, obviously not anywhere here in the South Shore, but there were some issues with...
Right, and some of the larger housing authorities, right, there were...
Chelsea and Winchester and...
certainly made the headlines of the Boston Globe, and I think that he felt that he needed to do something with it. He has come up with a plan right now to regionalize all housing authorities into 6 major housing authorities. Apparently each of those regional agencies would be about the size of the Chicago Housing Authority, which that's a lot of units to maintain.
How many housing authorities are there now? Do you know? About 240?
241.
Is that right?
Or 242. You hear some different. So for being in a small housing authority, I see some beauty. I think it's a nice way for tenants to connect with the housing authorities. Every housing authority is a little bit different. To have the policy making, all of this would be governed by a governor-appointed board of 9 members. So the control would go from out of the local town.
So, for instance, the local housing authority members that are elected in Pembroke,
that would all be dissolved. All the local housing authorities would be dissolved. All the assets from the housing authority would go to this large regional structure. I think part of that's in response to some complaints that small housing authorities have had over the years, that we need some additional help with some major things like procurement or capital plans where we don't have the technical expertise. But I think it's a plan that goes too far.
Now, when you guys, obviously read about what happened in Chelsea, I'm sure, as housing authority directors, is something that comes up. Do you worry that kind of, like anything, people are going to reach for conclusions that, if there's a problem there must be a problem elsewhere? Does that worry you guys that people might get the wrong impression from that?
What? Think housing is a lucrative profession?
Yeah, that you have $200,000, here, and massive staffs, and
How it happened is kind of a bit baffling to me, because they were audited. We're audited every year. We're required by HUD to be audited every year. So I feel like people weren't reporting what was there. It wasn't. It was amazing to me. I'm not concerned.
It's a whole different world. You guys are running much more.
And certainly it's large. It's easier to hide something in a larger venue than it is in a smaller venue.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about there's an alternative plan, which I think is a good one that we've talked about in the past. I want to talk about that. We're going to take a quick break to come back. And again, I'm Representative Josh Cutler, and you're listening to Cutler's Corner with Housing Authority Directors in Pembroke, Duxbury, and Hanson, and we'll be right back.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen, petrified. Not knowing what to do, they do nothing. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Making Home Affordable is a free government program. Call now to talk one-on-one with a housing expert about the options that are right for you. Real help, real answers, right now.
Hi folks, welcome back. I'm Representative Josh Cutler and you're watching Cutler's Corner. With me today are the Housing Authority Directors in 3 of my communities, Hanson, Duxbury, and Pembroke. We have Sharon Sylvester from Pembroke, Karen Riley from Hanson, and Michelle Gill from Duxbury. And just before the break we were talking about a plan that Governor Patrick had floated to really dramatically or drastically eliminate or consolidate many of the housing authorities that we see today. There are currently about 240 housing authorities, and he would consolidate that into 6. We had some discussion. I think there's general agreement among folks that that is, while well-intentioned, a bit of an overreach, and that we want to maintain that local control that we see, while still acknowledging that there are places there is room for improvement. And I think, to your credit and to the credit of Housing Authority Directors, you guys have actually asked for changes, which the legislature hasn't really responded as quickly as we should have. But you have asked for changes to be made in the way that we regulate our housing authorities. And in fact, a trade association that represents housing authorities has come up with an alternative bill to offer a little bit of something a little bit different than what the governor is talking about, that I think that we had a good discussion about at a panel recently. And I'd like to talk about that and get some of your thoughts about that. Instead of consolidating from 240 down to 6, we maintain local control, but we would regionalize many of the services. So, for instance, procurement services, when you have to go buy something, or accounting services, where you have to, do a series of steps to make sure you're, doing all your taxes and being transparent in those systems. That adds a burden to a small housing authority. Having 1.5 maintenance people, as Michelle was talking about, that's a burden, and when you have to share that. So there's ways where we can save money by working together, and we want to make sure we're doing that and making sure that we're doing it in a transparent manner. So I want to get your thoughts about the alternative plan that has been put forth. And I know, Karen, you're particularly concerned about this issue of maintaining local control, because under the governor's plan we would lose our local housing authorities. We'd lose the ability to have local direct say over how we run our housing authorities, and that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm really upset about that part. I feel that we need to have an office located at the authority, so the tenants can come in and address what their concerns are. Also, just to keep a watch over everything that's going on and to make sure everybody's safe.
What would we, if we didn't have that? What would we, if this were done from a regional office, say in Brockton or somewhere else, Taunton? What would we lose in that?
I don't know how they would handle it, because I have very sick tenants at my senior elderly complex that need to be kept an eye on, the services that come in. At one time I had 3 people on hospice. If you have 6 big administrative offices not connected directly to the local housing authority, how would they keep track of everything and make sure that everybody's taken care of?
Sure.
And how can they reach out if they have concerns? That really
one of the big things as an elected official, accountability is very important,
right.
Folks. People want me to be accountable, and I need to be accountable, and you are accountable as well to a housing authority board.
Right.
There's a number of people who are elected in the town of Hanson, and the same goes for everyone. And losing that, that you'd lose some accountability. Would you not?
Well, you would lose all the local information and preference from the people in the town.
Yeah.
We get a lot of feedback, and having a local board and being able to discuss things with the local board that knows what's going on in the town itself is a big help there too.
Yeah. Sharon, for your sake, from Pembroke, what are some of the ways where we could sort of improve operations by streamlining and collaborating with other, having housing authorities working together, smaller ones, to offer savings or better efficiencies?
Well, there's lots of ways. Housing authorities have looked for this for a number of years and have worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development to try and implement some of the very changes that are in this legislation. One of the things that we see is the centralized waiting list. Right now, it's very cumbersome for an applicant if they want to apply for housing. They have to put an application into each housing authority. In this system, it would be similar to the Section 8, there's a centralized waiting list. They would put one application in that all the housing authorities could then access.
Would that be done electronically, or would it be?
It could be done. The Section 8 is done electronically, so I imagine if it was modeled after that, it's very successful.
But someone could still keep that local preference option?
They would still keep the local. Yes, it's all within the computer system, programming system. That's an awesome thing. That would also save on staff time for processing application after application.
It seems silly that we haven't done that yet.
It does seem silly.
And I guess I'll throw the blame back on myself as a legislator. That the legislature should have done something about this sooner, don't you think?
Well, I would have hoped so. I understand there was a cost factor to it, though. Okay. You know, sometimes with the government you hear these cost factors. You go, really? Why would that cost so much? But
well, you know, there's a worry in all forms of unfunded mandates. We have a tendency to, when I say we in the legislature, to pass new laws, which may be well intended, but we don't realize that there are always costs associated with that we don't always necessarily give you the money to pay for. So we don't want to be adding unfunded mandates. We want to make your jobs easier and not harder.
They also it has a vacancy turnover initiative. Sometimes if you have a big storm, like we just had those major storms that come through, and you happen to have several people who move out, you can get backed up very quickly. Our job is to house people. So if within the housing authorities, if we were together, you could combine work. One housing authority could come over and help the other housing authority with that. The stopping point in that in the past has been liability issues with insurance and stuff. Nobody could quite work that out. So I'm hoping that with the legislation this could be worked out. There's also components to it for accreditation for housing authorities, which I think is very important. It helps assure the taxpayer that their tax dollars are being well spent. I think it's a great thing. I mean, I can't think of a business where you're not accredited, or don't have to be accredited. That's
right.
Really
And many town facilities are, libraries are often accredited, or even the police departments are accredited now, and so housing authorities are not.
That's right. That's right. They would also, it also has audit mandates in it, which I think is great right now. If you have federal housing, you are required to pay for an annual audit, but in the state, you had to wait for the state auditor's department. If they got backed up, which they have been recently, we don't see them for 3 years.
I believe they're required to do an audit every 3 years, but this legislation would require an annual audit.
Would require an annual audit, which is another great thing, because if you're making a mistake, really, an audit's there to help you. You want to find out what you're doing so you don't continue to do the same thing incorrectly anyway. So all very positive things. Procurement is another piece of it. Because the procurement laws in Massachusetts are very complicated. It's good to have somebody who has certification as an MCPPO through the Inspector General's office to make sure that they're complying with all of those. So that would be another thing. Smaller housing authorities, it's difficult for us to be able to keep up with that, even if
you're an expert in every single one of those things.
And I think part of the governor's legislation is trying to deal with that. I do have an MCPPO, but then I have to keep paying attention to all the changes that have been made. So that's difficult as well. So.
And Michelle, you're talking about you have your 1.5 maintenance fellow there. How could we make that easier so that we had more sharing of resources amongst the various housing authorities to avoid having maintenance issues or reducing the overall cost?
Well, if we were able to collaborate and have management agreements and share services, unit turnovers would happen quickly.
What's the case now? Is that not always necessarily the case? Or?
Well, if I've got a man and a half at a complex comprised of 52 units and 7 scattered sites, 5 of which are homes, if you have to flip a house at the same time that you're tending to a 52-unit complex that has plumbing issues, how is that possible? It seems...
When you say flip a house, you mean so someone who's no longer living there.
So when they vacate,
it's time to put a new person in.
Get in, paint it. I mean, it depends on the shape of the dwelling, and if someone's lived there for a long period of time, then there's usually a considerable amount of work to do just to get it in good shape for the new tenant. And it's definitely something that you would have to do on an 8-hour day for a while. And how would you do that if you're being asked to do plumbing issues across town at the main complex? It's a huge feat. So being able to share services would be very beneficial.
And this is something that this legislation from the Mass National Association of Housing housing authorities. I'm not sure the exact acronym.
Housing and
I think there's an R in there somewhere.
redevelopment.
And redevelopment authorities. This is all part of this legislation. Would allow you all to do all those things. The extra auditing, greater transparency, sharing of resources, regionalization, while preserving that local control that Karen was talking about.
Right.
Right. Now, you guys, we had a nice visit at the State House not too long ago, where you guys came in to have a sort of a lobby day, talk about this bill. What did you? You got a chance to kind of go around the State House and talk to your legislators, including myself, and have a nice lunch with some of the colleagues. What were your impressions after that, seeing all that process? Sharon, I'll throw it to you.
I was actually very encouraged by going there. There seemed to be a lot of support for the mass narrow legislation, this alternative legislation, where we're a collaboration. They felt that the governor's legislation was going just a bit too far in throwing out the baby with the bathwater type of thing.
I noticed one thing. Sorry, not to interrupt. There was a good bipartisan agreement there. You had some of the state's top Republicans and top Democrats both speaking out in favor of that plan. I thought that was very, very encouraging.
Right.
Do you guys agree?
Yes, I do.
That's not always the case. Let me just tell you. Sometimes we try. But so that was a very positive.
It was, and it was also nice to have housing authorities, because I think people don't know about housing authorities. I think people don't know how to access housing authorities. I don't think we reach all the people that we need to. So I think this is almost, the bad publicity can be good publicity for us as well, and that more people will pay attention to us a little bit.
It takes
and we can help more people.
Bad news somewhere else to focus attention.
That's right.
And get a chance to make improvements.
Right.
That's what sounds like. You guys are really. I applaud you for it's sometimes folks are resistant to change, but you guys are asking for change and just trying to make it work. So I think that's a great thing. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but just any other issues in terms of the housing authorities that you all see that you think are important for folks to know about. Any other issues? Let's say we get through and this legislation passes, which is obviously there are many steps involved. What will be the next big thing for housing authorities? How can we do a better job serving the public? Any thoughts or ideas on that?
Well, I think that we need to figure out better ways to do some of our capital projects. It's very expensive. That's always a problem. These are aging developments.
For instance, how old are some of the buildings that you guys are housing residents?
My buildings are 32 years old.
32, okay.
And I've been doing some big projects as far as repairing the outside drive-it on the buildings, which is the cement was not put on properly, so they have to go back in and redo that and replace windows and doors, roofs, boilers.
So how do you do capital improvements now? You have to bond them, or how?
We have formula funding that we work with through the state, and I've put in for many grants to, for instance, for the boilers. Some of it came from DHCD and the other part came from the energy retrofit program. I had 4 grants through them, insulation, boilers, low-flow toilets, and so forth.
Sharon, how about yourself?
They did do this low-flow toilets that statewide. They bought lots of them, and housing authorities got to do it. It was great. It saved water, energy, doing those things. I look at most of these developments are older. My oldest development was 1969. We have terrible asphalt problems. I think that's true probably in a lot of developments. I think, gosh, if they could do like a statewide asphalt contract, maybe we could get better prices. Maybe we could do that, because the formula funding is not enough for us to take on some of those things. So we're doing kind of like patchwork.
Michelle, and what are the ages of the buildings over in Duxbury?
My main complex, I think, was built in 1974. So it is, it is an aged complex. So that is what ends up happening, though, the patch job, which is great for a quick fix, but that's what it is. So.
Well, great. I think we've just about run out of time. But I want to thank all of you for coming on the show and talking a little bit about housing authorities and how they work, and also this legislation that's upcoming. We'll maybe have you back later in the year as this continues to advance, and hopefully we'll have a success to report. But again, I want to thank you and thank our listeners for tuning in. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about how our local housing authorities work. Again, you've been watching Cutler's Corner. I'm State Representative Josh Cutler, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you.